The moment the CEO laughed at his tiny business, everyone in the glass-walled conference room laughed with her. Nobody noticed the single father quietly folding the corner of his only product brochure, trying to hide the trembling in his fingers. They saw an ordinary man in a faded blue shirt standing beside a cheap display table. They saw a business that looked too small to matter. What they did not see was the little apartment he had sold almost everything to keep, the nights he had spent working while his daughter slept beside him, or the promise he had made to his late wife that he would never give up on their child's future. And they certainly did not know that, before that day was over, the very company laughing at him would discover that the world's biggest technology company was willing to offer him something they could never match. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of ordinary people who refuse to give up, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, leave a comment, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. His name was Tavian Mercer, a 38-year-old father who ran a tiny technology repair and accessibility business from a rented workshop behind an old neighborhood grocery store. The business was called Brightbridge, and from the outside it looked almost laughably small. There was one workbench, 2 aging computers, a second-hand printer, and a hand-painted sign above the door. But Tavian had built Brightbridge around one simple idea: technology should not become useless simply because someone cannot afford the newest device or because a disability makes ordinary technology difficult to use. He repaired broken laptops for teachers, modified keyboards for elderly customers, built simple voice-controlled tools for people with limited mobility, and sometimes charged nothing when he knew someone genuinely could not pay. His 12-year-old daughter, Soraya, often helped him after school, organizing screws into tiny containers and testing repaired devices while doing her homework at the same battered wooden table. Tavian had not planned to become a struggling entrepreneur. 5 years earlier, he had been an electrical technician at a large manufacturing company, earning enough to provide a comfortable life for his family. Then his wife, Mireya, became seriously ill. Hospital bills swallowed their savings. Tavian eventually left his job to care for her and Soraya. When Mireya passed away, he found himself raising his daughter alone, carrying grief in one hand and responsibility in the other. He could have searched for another corporate job, but he remembered how many people had begged him to repair their devices because replacing them was impossible. So he borrowed a little money, rented the workshop, and started Brightbridge. For 3 years, he survived rather than prospered. Some months were good. Others were frightening. There were evenings when Tavian stared at unpaid bills after Soraya went to bed, wondering whether he was being brave or simply foolish. Yet every morning he opened the workshop. He believed that small things mattered. A repaired laptop could help a student finish school. A modified phone could help an elderly person call family. A simple piece of software could give someone independence. To Tavian, that was enough reason to continue. Then came the Business Innovation Exhibition that changed everything. Tavian had developed a low-cost accessibility system called Bridge Voice, a compact device and software platform that allowed people with limited hand movement to control basic computer functions using simple voice commands and personalized prompts. It was not flashy. It did not come in a luxurious package. But it worked, and more importantly, it was affordable. Tavian believed it could eventually help thousands of people who had been ignored by expensive technology companies. The exhibition attracted executives from some of the biggest companies in the region. Among them was Celestine Voss, the 46-year-old CEO of a powerful technology corporation known for acquiring promising startups before turning them into billion-dollar products. Celestine arrived in a sleek black vehicle and walked through the exhibition hall surrounded by assistants. Her company had millions of dollars, hundreds of engineers, and offices in several countries. When she reached Tavian's table, she looked at his handmade prototype and then at the small sign displaying Brightbridge's name. Her expression changed into an amused smile. She asked how much investment Tavian had received, and when he admitted that he had funded most of it himself, her smile became wider. She looked around the room as if expecting someone to reveal that it was all a joke. Tavian calmly explained the product, the people it helped, and his plans to make it available to schools and families who could not afford expensive accessibility technology. Celestine barely listened. She pointed toward his tiny table and compared it to the enormous display belonging to her corporation across the hall. She suggested that Tavian should be grateful simply to have been invited. Then she dismissed Brightbridge as a hobby that had accidentally wandered into a serious business exhibition. Several executives nearby laughed. Tavian felt the humiliation burn through him, but he refused to argue. He simply thanked her for stopping by. That evening, Tavian returned home and found Soraya sitting at the kitchen table with her schoolbooks open. She immediately noticed that something was wrong. Tavian told her that sometimes people judged a dream by the size of the room where it began. Soraya looked at the repaired computer beside her and reminded him that their business had already helped people who had nowhere else to go. Tavian smiled, but after she went to sleep, he sat alone in the workshop and nearly decided to shut Brightbridge down. The next morning, something unexpected happened. An email arrived from an engineer who had attended the exhibition. The engineer worked for Google and had secretly tested Bridge Voice after the event. The message said the system had attracted serious attention from a research team studying affordable accessibility technology. Tavian assumed it was simply a polite inquiry. Then his phone rang. The caller identified herself as a senior technology partnerships director at Google. She explained that their team had spent the night examining Tavian's prototype and reviewing its potential applications. They wanted to meet him immediately. They were interested not only in the product but in Tavian's approach to designing technology around real human needs instead of luxury features. They wanted to discuss a partnership, research funding, manufacturing support, and a possible acquisition. Tavian sat completely still. He thought of the tiny workshop. The second-hand computers. Soraya doing homework beside him. Mireya's promise that their daughter would always know what it meant to care about people. He asked whether they were certain they had contacted the right person. The director laughed warmly and told him they had never been more certain. Within days, Tavian traveled to meet the Google team. Engineers examined Bridge Voice, but instead of treating him like a small-time inventor, they asked questions and listened. They wanted to understand why he had built certain features, how customers had responded, and what barriers he had encountered. Tavian realized that the product was not valuable because it was complicated. It was valuable because he had spent years listening to people everyone else overlooked. Meanwhile, Celestine heard about the meeting. At first, she dismissed the news. Then she learned that Google was considering an offer large enough to transform Brightbridge overnight. Her confidence disappeared. She instructed her executives to contact Tavian immediately. Her corporation suddenly wanted to acquire the technology it had mocked days earlier. Tavian received the proposal and stared at the numbers. The amount was more money than he had ever imagined seeing in his lifetime. But there was one condition that bothered him. The corporation wanted control over pricing and distribution. Tavian knew what that could mean. The product designed for ordinary families could become too expensive for the very people who needed it. Instead of accepting the biggest check, Tavian asked Google whether they would support a model that kept the technology affordable. Their team agreed to explore exactly that. Months later, Brightbridge was no longer operating from the tiny workshop. With new funding and technical support, Tavian built a larger research center focused on affordable accessibility technology. Soraya kept her place at the center of the story, too. She became the unofficial youngest tester, still sitting at a desk with her homework while engineers worked nearby. Tavian did not become successful because someone rescued him. He became successful because someone finally recognized the value that had been there all along. One afternoon, Celestine visited the new center. She stood quietly beside the entrance, looking at the photographs of families using Bridge Voice. She admitted that she had judged Tavian too quickly. Tavian did not humiliate her in return. He simply told her that sometimes people become so focused on measuring success that they forget to notice what success is supposed to accomplish. Celestine left without another word. Tavian watched her disappear through the glass doors and thought about how close he had come to quitting. He remembered that night when he had nearly closed Brightbridge forever. If he had given up one morning earlier, none of this would have happened. That evening, he returned home and found Soraya waiting with a small cardboard box. Inside was the old hand-painted Brightbridge sign from their first workshop. She had cleaned it and carefully restored the lettering. Tavian held it against his chest, overwhelmed by memories of the years when every dollar mattered and every small victory felt enormous. He realized then that the greatest part of his journey was not the Google offer, the new building, or the money. It was the fact that he had shown his daughter what perseverance looked like when nobody was applauding. And perhaps that is the lesson hidden inside Tavian's story. Sometimes your beginning will look too small to impress anyone. Sometimes people with bigger offices, bigger bank accounts, and louder voices will tell you that your dream is insignificant. But the size of your beginning does not determine the size of your future. A tiny workshop can become a global idea. A single parent can become an innovator. A person everyone overlooks can become the person everyone eventually needs. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who is struggling, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad. Your engagement may seem like a small thing, but small things are often where the biggest changes begin. And here is our special request: before you leave, comment, "Small beginnings can change the world," if you believe that kindness, courage, and persistence can turn an ordinary life into something extraordinary. Because Tavian Mercer never needed someone to tell him that his dream was big. He only needed the courage to keep building it when everyone else thought it was too small. And sometimes, that is the difference between a dream that disappears and a dream that changes the world.